Please do not let them take it, Danielle Whitmore whispered, her voice so faint that Elias Brooks almost thought the rain had said it. The black sedan stood beneath the awning of a closed downtown pharmacy, its engine idling softly while water slid down the windows in silver lines. It was nearly midnight. The city had emptied itself into puddles, traffic lights, and the distant hiss of tires on wet pavement. Elias kept both hands loose on the steering wheel, afraid that even breathing too loudly might wake the woman asleep against his shoulder. Danielle Whitmore was not supposed to look like this. Every business magazine in Chicago showed her in sharp white suits, standing beneath glass chandeliers with a calm expression that made investors sit straighter. At 33, she ran Whitmore Urban Development, a company that owned half the skyline and had plans for the other half. She was called cold in boardrooms, untouchable in newspapers, and impossible by people who had tried to get close. But tonight, her head rested against the worn gray fabric of Elias's jacket, and one hand was curled near her chest as if she had been holding something invisible for too long. Elias had met her only 40 minutes earlier, outside the Whitmore Tower on Lake Street. He had been waiting for a late repair call from a property manager when he saw her step out through the revolving doors alone. No driver. No assistant. No umbrella. Just a black wool coat, rain darkening the shoulders, and a face that looked too pale under the lobby lights. She had walked 3 steps toward the curb, then stopped as if the ground had shifted beneath her. "Are you all right?" Elias had asked through the open passenger window. She had looked at him with the kind of caution people carried when they had learned that every favor came with a price. "I am fine," she said. Her voice had been steady, but her fingers were trembling around her phone. Elias had seen enough long nights to know the difference between fine and barely standing. "It is raining hard," he said. "I can take you home." "I do not know you." "That is true." He nodded toward the empty street. "But I know you should not be out here alone." Something in her expression tightened. Then her phone lit up again. She looked down at the screen, and the color drained from her face. Elias did not ask who had called. He only waited. Finally, she opened the passenger door and sat inside. She gave him an address in Lincoln Park, then turned toward the window. For the first 10 minutes neither of them spoke. The heater pushed warm air through the old vents. The car smelled faintly of coffee, clean laundry, and the peppermint gum Maya had dropped under the seat that morning. Elias drove carefully through the rain, past dark storefronts and glowing bus shelters. Danielle stared at the city as if she had built it herself and still did not recognize it. "Long day?" he asked when the silence became too heavy. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Long life." Elias glanced at her, then back at the road. "Those can be harder." She turned toward him. For a second, he expected the familiar look he had received from wealthy clients who saw his work boots, his faded jacket, his dark skin, and decided they already knew his whole story. But Danielle only looked tired. "Do you always talk to strangers like this?" she asked. "Only the ones who look like they need someone to." Her eyes lowered. The phone vibrated again in her lap. This time she did not answer it. She pressed the power button until the screen went black. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the river. Inside the car, the silence changed. It was no longer sharp. It was fragile. A few minutes later, Danielle's head tipped slowly toward the window, then away from it. Elias reached the next red light and felt the soft weight of her shoulder against his arm. He did not move. He did not dare. Her breathing became even, but her brow remained furrowed, as if sleep had only opened another room full of worry. Then she whispered those words again. "Please do not let them take it." Elias looked at her sleeping face, at the rain trembling on the glass, at the dark phone in her hand. He had no idea what she meant. But before the light turned green, he knew one thing with certainty. Whatever Danielle Whitmore was afraid of, it was bigger than a late night and a lonely ride home. Danielle woke with a sharp breath when the sedan rolled to a stop beneath the stone awning of her building. For one confused second, she did not know where she was. Then she felt the warmth of Elias's shoulder beneath her cheek and pulled back so quickly that the seat belt caught against her coat. Her eyes moved from the rain-covered windshield to the dashboard clock. 12:23 in the morning? Elias kept his gaze on the front entrance, giving her the privacy of not watching her embarrassment. "We are here," he said quietly. Danielle straightened her coat with both hands. The movement was precise, practiced, almost automatic. By the time the doorman opened the glass doors, the tired woman who had fallen asleep in a stranger's car had disappeared behind the face people expected from Danielle Whitmore. "How much do I owe you?" she asked. Elias turned toward her. "Nothing." Her expression tightened. "You drove across the city. I was headed this way." It was not exactly true, but it was close enough. His apartment was on the other side of town, and Maya would be asleep on the couch waiting for him to carry her to bed. Still, he did not want her money. Not after hearing the fear in her voice. Danielle reached into her purse and pulled out a folded bill. "Please." Elias shook his head. "Keep it. I do not accept favors. Then call it one decent thing between two tired people." She looked at him as if no one had spoken to her that way in a long time. Outside, the doorman waited beneath the awning, pretending not to notice. Danielle lowered the bills slowly. "You do not know who I am," she said. Elias gave a small smile. "I know enough." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means you look tired, not weak." The words seemed to reach somewhere beneath her careful expression. She looked away first. "Good night, Mr. Brooks." Elias had not told her his name. He glanced at the work identification card hanging from his rearview mirror and understood. Danielle opened the door, then paused with one foot on the sidewalk. "You should be careful about giving rides to strangers." Elias looked at the rain falling beyond the awning. "You should be careful about walking alone when you are exhausted." For a moment, something almost like a smile touched her face. Then she stepped out and disappeared through the revolving doors. Elias watched until the doorman closed the glass behind her. Only then did he pull away from the curb. The next morning, he stood in the kitchen of his small apartment on the south side, packing Maya's lunch while the coffee maker sputtered beside the sink. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of old steel. Maya sat at the table in a purple sweatshirt, carefully peeling the label from a juice box. "You got home late," she said. Elias placed a turkey sandwich into her lunch bag. "I had a job." "A real job or one of your mysterious jobs?" He looked at her. "What makes a job mysterious?" "When you come home looking like you were thinking too much." Elias laughed softly. "That is not a job. That is being a dad." Maya considered that, then pointed toward the small framed photo on the refrigerator. It showed Elias, Maya, and her mother at a summer block party years ago, all three smiling into the sun. "Did you help somebody?" she asked. Elias closed the lunch bag. "Maybe." "Was she sad?" His hand stopped for a second. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you only get that face when somebody is sad." Elias looked at his daughter, then at the rainwater still clinging to the kitchen window. "She was tired," he said. Maya nodded as if tired could explain almost anything. "Everybody needs sleep." "That is true." Across the city, Danielle sat at the head of a glass conference table, surrounded by executives discussing a redevelopment project called Harbor Point. Charts glowed on a wall screen. Numbers moved across the table in neat columns. Her Uncle Grant stood near the window, speaking about timelines, zoning approvals, and investor confidence. Danielle heard every word, but none of it settled. Her mind kept returning to the old sedan, the peppermint smell, and the way Elias had said she looked tired, not weak. Her phone buzzed beside her folder. A message from Grant appeared on the screen. "Do not forget what is at stake. We cannot lose Harbor Point." Danielle looked at the city map on the wall. A highlighted section covered several blocks of aging brick apartments near the river. She knew the address. She had known it since childhood. Her mother had grown up there. Her own earliest memories lived in those streets, before the towers, before the boardrooms, before everyone began calling her untouchable. Grant continued speaking, his voice smooth and certain. "The residents will be relocated," he said. "The company will handle it." Danielle looked down at her phone, then out at the gray city beyond the glass. Somewhere in that city, a man she had met by accident was probably fixing something with his hands. And for the first time in years, Danielle wondered whether the things she had been told were necessary had only been convenient for people who never had to lose a home. "You are the repairman from the car," Danielle said, and the surprise in her voice was the first honest thing Elias had heard from her since the rain. He stood just inside the service entrance of Whitmore Tower with a tool bag in one hand and a clipboard in the other. The building rose 38 floors above downtown Chicago, all black glass, brushed steel, and silent elevators that seemed too clean to belong to real people. A building manager had called him that morning about a flickering electrical panel on the 26th floor. Elias had accepted because the rate was good and Mayan needed new winter boots before the first snow. He had not expected the address to be printed beneath the name Whitmore Urban Development. Danielle stood near the reception desk in a cream blouse and charcoal skirt, a slim folder tucked beneath one arm. Her hair was pulled back today, and her face had returned to the calm, distant look from the magazines. But her eyes told a different story. "Good morning," Elias said. "Looks like I am here to fix a panel." Danielle glanced toward the manager, then back at him. "I did not know they called you." "Neither did I." The manager, a nervous man named Mr. Collins, cleared his throat. "The lights in the executive conference room keep dimming, Ms. Whitmore. We have a client presentation at 11. Elias nodded. "Show me the panel." Danielle hesitated. "I can take him." Mr. Collins looked relieved to hand the problem to someone else. "Of course." They crossed the lobby without speaking. Employees moved around them with tablets and coffee cups, lowering their voices when Danielle passed. Elias noticed it because he had seen that kind of silence before. It was not respect. It was fear dressed in business clothes. At the elevator, Danielle pressed a button, her hand steady this time. "You have a maintenance company?" she asked. "Mostly independent work. Buildings, apartments, small businesses. And last night?" "Last night I was waiting on a call." She looked at him. "You said you were headed my way." Elias gave her a brief smile. "I said close enough." The elevator doors opened. Inside, the walls were mirrors. Elias saw himself between polished metal and soft light, navy work shirt, worn boots, dark skin, tool bag. Beside him stood Danielle in clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The difference was obvious. So was the way she kept looking at him as if she had not decided what to do with the memory of falling asleep on his shoulder. On the 26th floor, they walked through a quiet hallway lined with framed photographs of new towers, ribbon cuttings, and men in suits holding gold shovels. Elias stopped at the electrical closet near the conference room. The panel door was warm beneath his hand. "Could be a loose connection," he said. "I will know in a minute." Danielle remained beside him. "Do you have a daughter?" Elias looked up. "How did you know?" "There was a purple crayon under your seat." He laughed once. "Maya. 8 years old. She leaves evidence everywhere." Danielle's expression softened. "Does she know what you do?" "She thinks I fix things." "Do you?" Elias opened the panel carefully. "Sometimes." The lights above them flickered once, then steadied. From the far end of the hallway, a man's voice cut through the quiet. "Danielle." Grant Whitmore approached in a navy suit, silver hair neat, his expression already impatient. He looked first at Danielle, then at Elias, then at the open electrical panel. "What is this?" Danielle straightened. "A repair." Grant's eyes settled on Elias's work shirt. "Mr. Collins could not find anyone from the approved vendor list?" Elias kept his attention on the panel. He had heard that tone before. It always arrived before someone decided he did not belong in the room. Danielle said, "He is qualified." Grant gave a thin smile. I am sure he is. His gaze moved over Elias slowly, taking in the tool bag, the boots, the name patch. Just make sure he stays in the service areas. The hallway went quiet. Danielle's face changed, but not fast enough. Elias felt the old familiar heat rise in his chest, the kind that came from being measured before he had spoken. He tightened one screw, then closed the panel. The connection is secure now, he said. The lights should hold. Grant looked amused. Good. Then you can be on your way. Elias picked up his tool bag. Danielle opened her mouth, but no words came. That was what he noticed most. Not Grant's insult. Not the polished hallway. The silence from the woman who had rested against him in the rain and trusted him enough to sleep. Elias walked toward the elevator without looking back. Behind him, the conference room lights came on bright and steady. But Danielle remained in the hallway, staring at the closed electrical panel as if it had revealed something she had spent years refusing to see. By the time Elias reached the lobby, the rain had started again, tapping against the glass doors in a steady gray rhythm. He signed the work order at the security desk, accepted the payment confirmation from Mr. Collins, and walked outside without looking back at Whitmore Tower. The cold air hit his face clean and sharp. He welcomed it. He had spent too many years learning how to leave a room before anger made other people comfortable calling him difficult. His phone buzzed before he reached his truck. Maya's school had sent a reminder about the parent reading night on Friday. He stared at the message for a moment, then slipped the phone into his pocket and drove toward his next job. Upstairs, Danielle stood alone in the hallway outside the conference room while Grant adjusted his cufflinks as if nothing had happened. You did not need to say that, she told him. Grant turned toward her with mild surprise. Say what? You know what? He smiled, patient in the way people smiled when they believed they had already won. Danielle, you are under pressure. Do not make a scene over a contractor. He is not just a contractor. Grant's eyes sharpened. Then what is he? The question landed harder than she expected. Danielle looked through the glass wall at the conference table where investors were taking their seats. The Harbor Point maps waited on the screen. Blocks of old brick buildings had been turned into colored squares, clean and simple, with no names attached. She thought of Elias standing beside the electrical panel, his hands steady even after Grant had tried to reduce him to a uniform and a service entrance. He is a person, she said. Grant gave a short laugh. Of course he is. That is not the point. Then what is the point? The point is that you cannot afford distractions. Harbor Point is the largest project this company has pursued in 10 years. We need the board united. We need the press quiet. And we do not need people wondering why you are spending time with a man who drives an old sedan and works repair calls. Danielle felt her face grow still. You think that is what people will wonder? I think people will wonder what he wants. She looked at him then, really looked. The silver hair, the perfect suit, the calm confidence that had filled every room since her father died. Grant had always spoken as if he were protecting her. But suddenly his protection looked like a locked door. Maybe you should wonder what you want, Danielle said. Grant's smile disappeared. Careful. The word was quiet, but it carried years of control inside it. Danielle entered the conference room without answering. The presentation began at 11. Grant spoke about growth, opportunity, and a new waterfront district that would transform the city. Investors nodded as glossy images filled the screen: glass towers, green parks, luxury shops, bright sidewalks without a single cracked step. Danielle sat at the end of the table, listening to words she had approved a dozen times before. Relocation assistance. Market adjustment. Community transition. Each phrase sounded clean until she pictured families carrying boxes down wet stairwells. When the presentation ended, applause moved around the room. Danielle did not clap. Her phone lay face down beside her notebook. Under it was a small object she had found near the elevator after Elias left, a purple braided bracelet with a tiny silver star charm. She had picked it up without thinking. Now she turned it over in her fingers. On the inside, written in faded black marker, were 2 words, Maya Brooks. Danielle closed her hand around it. That evening, she left the tower without telling Grant where she was going. She drove herself south through the city, past neighborhoods that changed block by block, past corner stores glowing under yellow signs, past buses breathing steam into the cold air. The address on Elias's work invoice led her to a brick apartment building with a narrow front stoop and a broken porch light. She parked across the street and sat for a moment with the bracelet in her palm. She could have asked an assistant to return it. She could have mailed it. She could have done the easy thing and kept the distance that had always protected her. But then she saw Elias through the first-floor window. He was kneeling beside an elderly woman's radiator with his tool bag open on the floor. Maya sat at the kitchen table nearby, doing homework under a lamp. The elderly woman held a blanket around her shoulders, watching Elias with the quiet trust of someone who had run out of people to call. Elias tightened a valve, waited, then smiled when warm air began to move through the metal pipes. Maya clapped softly. The woman reached for her purse, but Elias shook his head. Danielle could not hear his words through the glass, but she saw the woman's eyes fill as he placed the purse back in her lap. He was not performing for anyone. He did not know she was watching. He was simply helping because someone was cold. Danielle looked down at the bracelet in her hand. For the first time, she understood why Elias had refused her money. It was not pride. It was not judgment. It was something she had almost forgotten existed. A way of moving through the world that did not begin with a price. She stepped out of the car and crossed the wet street. Before she reached the building, Elias looked up through the window and saw her standing beneath the broken porch light, holding Maya's bracelet in her hand. The apartment door opened before Danielle could knock. Maya stood there in mismatched socks, one hand holding a pencil, the other pressed against the frame. Her eyes moved from Danielle's dark coat to the purple bracelet in her hand. "That is mine," she said. Danielle lowered herself slightly so they were closer to eye level. "I found it at my office." Maya took it carefully, turning the silver star charm beneath the porch light. "I thought I lost it forever. I am glad I could bring it back." From inside, Elias stepped into the hallway with a small wrench still in his hand. He looked from Maya to Danielle, then past her to the black car parked across the street. His face did not soften. "You could have mailed it," he said. Danielle nodded. "I could have." The elderly woman from the apartment sat near the radiator behind him, wrapped in a blue blanket. Warm air now moved through the room with a quiet metallic hum. Danielle looked at the open tool bag, the loose screws on a folded towel, and the small kitchen table covered in homework papers. Nothing in the room was polished. Nothing was designed to impress anyone. Yet it felt warmer than the top floor of Whitmore Tower had ever felt. "I came to return the bracelet," Danielle said. "And to apologize." Elias leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "For what?" "For standing there this morning and saying nothing." Maya looked between them, sensing the change in the air even if she did not understand it. The elderly woman quietly lifted her teacup and looked toward the window. Danielle kept her eyes on Elias. "My uncle spoke to you with disrespect. I should have stopped him." Elias's jaw tightened. "Yes, you should have." Danielle accepted the words without looking away. "I know." For a moment, the only sound was the radiator clicking as it warmed. Then Maya held up the bracelet. "Dad made this with me," she said. "The star was from my mom's old necklace." Elias looked at his daughter, and something in his expression shifted. Danielle's voice became softer. "It is beautiful." Maya smiled. "My mom likes stars." Danielle glanced at Elias. He did not explain. He did not need to. The absence was already in the room, gentle but permanent. "Thank you for bringing it back," he said at last. Danielle nodded. "You are welcome." She should have left then. She knew it. But the porch light above them flickered once, then went dark, leaving the entryway lit only by the yellow glow from the apartment window. Elias looked up at it automatically. I can fix that tomorrow, he said. Danielle looked at the broken fixture, then at the rainwater shining on the steps. You do not have to fix everything, she said. Elias gave a tired half-smile. I know. But I can fix a porch light. The words were simple, but they carried something that made Danielle's chest tighten. She had spent years surrounded by people who spoke about problems as if they were numbers on a screen. Elias saw a broken thing and asked what it needed. No speech. No strategy. Just attention. A car horn sounded down the street. Danielle stepped back from the door. I should go. Maya looked disappointed. You are the sleepy lady from Dad's car? Elias closed his eyes briefly. Danielle blinked, then looked at Maya. I suppose I am. Dad said you were tired? Danielle glanced at Elias, and he looked away toward the wet sidewalk. He was right, she said. Maya nodded with the solemn confidence of a child who believed sleep could solve more than adults admitted. You should rest more. Danielle smiled, a real one this time. I will try. As she turned toward the steps, Elias called after her. Danielle! She stopped. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the warm apartment light. Your uncle was wrong, he said. But you standing there quietly was not the same as agreeing with him. Danielle's face tightened. It felt the same to you. It did. He paused. What matters is what you do after you know that. Rain began again, light and steady. Danielle looked down at the bracelet around Maya's wrist, then at the old building with its dim hallway and patched brick. I do not know where to start, she admitted. Elias's expression softened, but only a little. Start by listening when people tell you what is broken. Danielle stood in the rain for a moment longer. Then she nodded and walked back to her car. She did not turn on the engine right away. Through the windshield, she watched Elias close the apartment door behind him. The porch light remained dark above the steps, but from inside the building, warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Danielle placed both hands on the steering wheel and looked toward the city skyline in the distance. Somewhere beyond those towers, Harbor Point was being discussed in rooms full of people who had never stood in a hallway where a broken radiator could mean a cold night. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Grant appeared, board dinner tomorrow. Do not be late. Danielle read it twice, then set the phone face down. For the first time, she did not feel afraid of being late. She felt afraid of arriving on time. The next afternoon, the wind came hard off the lake and pushed gray clouds over the city before school let out. Elias was halfway through replacing a damaged outlet in a small grocery store when his phone rang. He saw the school number and answered at once. Mr. Brooks? The receptionist said. This is Lincoln Elementary. We are closing early because of the storm. Several buses are delayed, and parents need to pick up their children. Elias looked at the open outlet box, then at the store owner waiting near the counter. I am 20 minutes away, he said. I will be there. He packed his tools faster than usual and drove north through streets already slick with rain. Traffic slowed near the river. A city bus had stalled at an intersection, and horns echoed between the buildings. By the time Elias reached the school, the sidewalk was crowded with parents holding umbrellas and children pressed close beneath the awning. But Maya was not there. He felt the cold move through him before he even reached the front office. She is safe, the receptionist said quickly. She is in the library with a few other students. The power went out in part of the building. Elias followed the dim hallway toward the library, his wet boots leaving dark marks on the tile. Emergency lights glowed along the walls. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled low and long. When he opened the library door, Maya looked up from a table near the windows. Relief crossed her face. Dad! She ran to him, and he crouched to hold her close. I am here, he said. I am sorry. It is okay. Ms. Carter gave us crackers. Then Maya looked past him, confused. Why is she here? Elias turned. Danielle stood near the back shelves in a dark raincoat, her hair damp at the ends. She held a flashlight in one hand and a cardboard tray of hot chocolate cups in the other. Two teachers spoke quietly beside her. Elias straightened slowly. Danielle? She looked almost embarrassed. The school called Whitmore Urban Development because our company owns the backup generator contract for this block. The technician got stuck in traffic. Elias glanced toward the ceiling lights. So you came? I was nearby. He looked at the cups in her hand. With hot chocolate? A small smile touched her face. The cafeteria worker said the children were cold. Maya walked closer, studying Danielle with open curiosity. Are you still tired? Danielle looked down at her. A little. You should drink hot chocolate. Danielle handed her a cup. That is exactly what I was thinking. For a few minutes, the storm held the whole school in a strange quiet. Children whispered over books. Teachers moved between tables with flashlights. Rain struck the windows in sheets. Elias watched Danielle sit beside Maya without trying to impress anyone. She listened as Maya explained the plot of a book about a girl who could talk to birds. She asked questions like the answers mattered. When Maya laughed, Danielle laughed too, and the sound seemed unfamiliar to her, as if she had not used it enough. Then the library lights flickered. A low hum rose from somewhere beneath the building. The backup generator had started. The children cheered. The teachers clapped softly. Elias looked toward the hallway, then at Danielle. You got it working? The technician talked me through the reset from his truck, she said. I only pushed the button. Sometimes that is all it takes. Danielle looked at him, remembering his words from the night before. Start by listening when people tell you what is broken. Outside, the rain eased enough for parents to begin leaving. Elias held Maya's umbrella while she walked between him and Danielle toward the parking lot. Her small hand slipped into his on one side and, after a brief hesitation, into Danielle's on the other. Danielle looked down at their joined hands, startled by the simple trust of it. She did not pull away. At the curb, Elias opened the passenger door of his truck for Maya. Danielle stood beside the rain-darkened pavement, her coat damp and her expression softer than he had ever seen it. Thank you, Elias said, for coming. I did not do much. You came. Danielle nodded. Her phone began ringing in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, and the warmth left her face. Grant Whitmore. She let it ring once, twice, then answered. Danielle, Grant said, his voice sharp even through the rain. Where are you? The board dinner starts in 40 minutes. Danielle looked at Elias and Maya in the truck, at the school behind them, at the children climbing into cars with their parents. I am handling something important, she said. Grant paused. More important than Harbor Point? Danielle watched Maya wave through the window. I am starting to think it is. Grant Whitmore did not raise his voice when Danielle arrived at the board dinner 40 minutes late. That was worse. The private dining room on the 42nd floor glowed with candlelight and polished glass, every place setting arranged with the kind of precision that made people afraid to move their hands. Outside, rain still streaked the windows, turning Chicago into a blur of silver and red. Danielle entered with damp hair, a plain dark coat, and no apology prepared. Grant stood near the end of the table beside a row of investors, his expression smooth enough to fool anyone who did not know him. There she is, he said. We were beginning to worry. Danielle removed her coat and handed it to an attendant. You did not need to. A few board members looked down at their menus. Claire Monroe, the company communications director, watched Danielle carefully from across the room. Danielle took her seat. A server placed a bowl of soup in front of her, but she did not touch it. Grant began speaking about Harbor Point before anyone had finished their first course. He talked about the waterfront, the new apartments, the retail spaces, and the projected return for investors. On the screen behind him, a digital rendering showed bright glass towers rising over a clean green park. Danielle looked at the image and saw something else. She saw Maya sitting in the dark library with a paper cup of hot chocolate. She saw Elias standing in the rain, trying to reach his daughter before the storm got worse. She saw the elderly woman's radiator clicking back to life. Grant pointed to a section of the map. The remaining residents have been notified. We are prepared to begin the transition process next month. Danielle lifted her eyes. How many families are still living there? Grant paused. The exact number is not relevant to this discussion. It is relevant to me. The room became still. Grant set down the remote. Danielle, we have reviewed this. No. You reviewed it. I signed what you put in front of me. Claire's gaze sharpened. One of the investors shifted in his chair. Grant's smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. The company has offered relocation support. For how long? Danielle asked. What happens after the first month? Where do people go when the rent increases? What happens to the older residents who cannot move across the city? What happens to the families whose children go to school there? Grant leaned toward her. You are emotional because of a difficult day. Danielle looked at him. No. I am asking questions because I should have asked them sooner. He lowered his voice. This is not the place. Then when is the place? The silence around the table deepened. Danielle's hands rested flat beside her untouched soup. She could feel her heartbeat in her wrists, but she did not look away. Grant had spent years teaching her that fear was the price of leadership. Tonight, she began to understand that silence had a price too. I want the relocation files, she said. Every address, every payment schedule, every complaint from the residents. I want them on my desk by morning. Grant's face hardened. You are not going to derail $1 billion project because you met a man in a work shirt. The words landed in the room like a dropped glass. Danielle did not flinch. This has nothing to do with what he wears. Does it not? Grant asked. You have known him for 2 days. And in 2 days he has shown me more honesty than some people have shown me in 20 years. Claire looked down, hiding a reaction. Grant stepped closer to Danielle's chair. You are confusing charity with character. Danielle stood. Her chair slid back softly against the floor. No, she said. I am finally learning the difference. She left the dining room before anyone could stop her. In the elevator, her hands began to shake. She pressed the lobby button and watched the numbers fall 1 floor at a time. When the doors opened, the building was nearly empty. The storm had softened to a thin, cold drizzle. Danielle walked to her car, but instead of getting in, she stood beneath the parking garage lights and opened the Harbor Point files on her phone. The public documents were clean. Too clean. Then she found a folder marked Internal Review, protected by a password she had not seen before. She tried her father's old company code. It failed. She tried Grant's birthday. It failed. Finally, she typed the street name from the neighborhood where her mother had grown up. The folder opened. Danielle stared at the screen. There were reports she had never been shown, including notices about faulty heating systems, delayed relocation payments, and a plan to clear the buildings before winter. At the bottom of the page was a note from Grant to the legal department. Keep the complaints contained until final approval. Danielle read it once. Then again. The rain tapped softly on the concrete above her. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photograph of Elias leaving the school with Maya, taken from across the street. Beneath it were 6 words, "Stay away from what is not yours." Danielle did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen island in her penthouse with the Harbor Point files open across 3 screens, the city lights blinking below her like distant warnings. The photograph of Elias and Maya remained on her phone, its message sitting beneath it with a coldness that made her stomach tighten. Stay away from what is not yours. She had read it so many times that the words had begun to lose their shape, but not their meaning. By sunrise, Danielle had made copies of every document in the protected folder and sent them to a private email account. Then she called Claire Monroe. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. Danielle, it is 6 in the morning. I need you at my apartment, Danielle said. Bring your laptop. Do not tell anyone. An hour later, Claire stood at the island reading the reports in silence. Her face changed as she moved through the pages. "These are internal documents," she said. "I know. The heating complaints go back almost a year." "I know." Claire looked up. "Grant buried this." Danielle stared at the gray sky beyond the windows. "He buried it, and I signed the project anyway." Claire closed the laptop slowly. "You did not know." "I should have known." The words came out flat, but they were true. Danielle had spent years believing that trust was a leadership skill. Now she understood that sometimes trust was only another name for not looking closely enough. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mr. Collins, the building manager at Whitmore Tower. He wrote that the company had cancelled Elias Brooks from the approved contractor list. No reason given. Danielle read the message twice, then called Elias. He did not answer. She called again. Still nothing. By noon, she drove to the address on his invoice, but his truck was gone. The broken porch light had been fixed, its small yellow bulb glowing even in daylight. An older woman from the building opened the door when Danielle knocked. "You are looking for Elias?" she asked. Danielle nodded. "He went to the community center. There is a meeting about Harbor Point." The woman's eyes narrowed with recognition. "Your company is the reason they are meeting." Danielle swallowed. "I know." The community center was 6 blocks away, a low brick building beside a basketball court slick with rain. Inside, folding chairs filled a multipurpose room that smelled like coffee, wet coats, and old wood. Families sat shoulder to shoulder beneath fluorescent lights. Children colored at a table near the back while adults spoke in low, worried voices. A large map of the neighborhood was taped to the wall. Red lines marked the buildings scheduled for demolition. Danielle stopped near the door. Elias stood at the front beside a woman holding a stack of notices. He wore the same navy work shirt from the tower, but his shoulders looked heavier today. When he saw Danielle, his face closed. "What are you doing here?" he asked. The room turned toward her. Danielle felt every eye. She could have left. She could have returned to the quiet safety of her car. Instead, she walked forward until she stood a few feet from him. "I came to listen," she said. Elias gave a short, humorless breath. "That is new. You are right." She looked at the families around them. "I should have listened before." A woman near the front raised a notice in her hand. "Are they really making us leave before winter?" Danielle looked at the paper, then at the red lines on the map. Her throat tightened. "That is what the current plan says." The room filled with anxious murmurs. Elias watched her carefully. "And what are you going to do about it?" Danielle took out her phone and opened the copied files. "I found reports showing that relocation payments were delayed and that the heating problems were ignored. I am going to stop the approval process." Elias's expression did not change. "Can you?" "I do not know yet." The honesty surprised even her. "But I will not pretend I can fix this alone." At the back of the room, Maya looked up from her coloring page. She had come in quietly with a neighbor after school. When she saw Danielle, she walked over and held out a piece of paper. It showed 3 small houses beneath a bright yellow sun, with people standing in front of them holding hands. "Nobody should take homes," Maya said. Danielle looked at the drawing. Her eyes burned, but she did not look away. "No," she said softly. "They should not." Elias took the paper from Maya and folded it carefully. Then he looked at Danielle. "You got a message, did you not?" Danielle froze. "How did you know?" "Because I got one too." He pulled out his phone. On the screen was a photograph of Danielle leaving the community center, taken only minutes earlier. Beneath it were the same words. "Stay away from what is not yours." Elias slipped the phone back into his pocket. "This is not just about a project anymore," he said. Danielle looked around the room at the families, the notices, the children, and the red lines on the wall. For the first time, she understood that the danger was not a threat sent through a phone. The danger was what happened when powerful people believed a neighborhood belonged to them before they had ever learned the names of the people living there. The meeting ended after dark, but Elias did not leave the community center right away. Most of the families had gone home carrying folders, notices, and questions that had no easy answers. The folding chairs stood crooked across the room. Half-empty coffee cups cooled on the tables. Maya slept beneath a donated coat in the corner, her cheek pressed against a backpack full of crayons. Danielle stood near the map on the wall, reading the red lines as if they had changed since the last time she looked. Elias watched her from across the room. He wanted to believe she meant what she said. He wanted to believe the woman from the tower had finally seen the people behind the paperwork. But he had learned not to build hope on promises made by people who could leave whenever things became difficult. "You should go home," he said. Danielle turned. "I will." "No, I mean it." His voice was calm, but tired. "You have already done enough for one day." She looked at the sleeping child, then back at him. "That does not sound like gratitude. It is not supposed to." Elias picked up a stack of notices from the table and aligned the corners. "You came here. You listened. That matters. But tomorrow, you will walk into a building where people wear expensive suits and decide whether this neighborhood gets to stay. I will still be here, helping people figure out where they are supposed to go." Danielle's face tightened. "You think I do not understand that? I think you are starting to." The words were not cruel. That made them harder to hear. Danielle stepped closer to the map. "My mother grew up 3 blocks from here," she said. Elias looked up. "What?" "Before my father built the company. Before we moved north. She used to tell me about the bakery on Harrison and the block parties by the river." Danielle touched the edge of the map with one finger. "When I was little, she brought me here once. I remember a blue porch, a man playing trumpet on the corner, and a woman giving me peach soda in a paper cup." Her voice became quieter. "I did not know this project was this neighborhood until 2 days ago." Elias studied her face. "How could you not know?" Danielle let out a breath. "Because people gave me summaries. They gave me projections. They gave me words like redevelopment and transition. And I let those words become enough." The room fell silent around them. Outside, a bus passed through wet streets, its headlights sliding across the windows. Elias looked toward Maya. "My mother used to say that people who make decisions from far away forget the ground has names." Danielle nodded slowly. She was right. Her phone rang. "Grant." Danielle stared at the screen until it stopped. A second later, it rang again. Elias watched her answer. "What?" she said. Grant's voice carried through the speaker, clipped and controlled. "You are making a serious mistake." Danielle stepped away from the table. "I am reviewing the files. You are embarrassing the company in front of residents and contractors." Elias's expression hardened at the word contractors. Danielle looked directly at him as she spoke. "They are residents. They are families. And Elias Brooks has done more for this neighborhood than our company has." There was a pause. Then Grant said, "You are letting him influence you." Danielle closed her eyes for 1 second. "No. He is making me look at what I refuse to see." Grant's voice turned colder. "Come to the office tomorrow morning. Alone. We will discuss your future with this company." The call ended. Danielle lowered the phone. Elias did not ask what Grant had said. He did not need to. "You do not have to fight him alone," he said. Danielle looked at him. "I have spent most of my life alone in rooms with him." Elias walked to the corner and lifted Maya carefully into his arms. She stirred but did not wake. Her small hand rested against his shoulder. "Then do not confuse being alone with being the only person who cares," he said. Danielle watched him carry his daughter toward the door. Before he left, Elias paused beside her. "Tomorrow, you will have to decide who you are when it costs you something." Danielle looked down at Maya's drawing, still folded on the table. 3 houses. A yellow sun. People holding hands. I know, she said. The next morning, Danielle entered Whitmore Tower before the lobby lights had fully warmed. The building felt different now. Every polished surface seemed to reflect a question back at her. Claire was waiting near the elevators with a thick folder and a travel mug. I found more, she said. Grant approved emergency contractor payments through a shell company. The same company sent the notices to the residents. Danielle took the folder. Can we prove it? Claire nodded. Yes. But if you bring this to the board, they may remove Grant. They may remove you too. Danielle looked toward the elevators. Then I should have brought a coat. As the doors opened, she saw Grant standing inside. He had been waiting for her. His silver hair was perfect. His smile was not. Good morning, Danielle, he said. I was hoping we could speak privately. Danielle stepped into the elevator beside Claire, holding the folder against her chest. We can, she said. But not the way you want. The elevator doors closed with Grant inside them, and for a few seconds no one spoke. The car rose through the tower with a soft mechanical hum, carrying Danielle, Claire, and the man who had shaped so much of Danielle's life. Grant looked at the folder in Danielle's arms, then at Claire. You brought communications into this? He asked. Claire held his gaze. I brought myself. Grant gave a quiet laugh. That is disappointing. Danielle watched the floor numbers change above the doors. You have been disappointed in people for a long time, she said. Maybe that is because you only value them when they obey you. Grant's expression hardened. You are speaking emotionally again. No, Danielle said. I am speaking clearly. When the elevator opened on the executive floor, Grant walked ahead as if the conversation belonged to him. He led them into his office, a large room lined with framed photographs of groundbreakings and award ceremonies. In nearly every picture, Grant stood at the center holding a shovel, shaking a hand, accepting applause. Danielle had seen those photographs since she was a child. She used to believe they showed a man who built things. Now they looked like proof of how carefully he had placed himself in every story. Sit down, Grant said. Danielle remained standing. No. He turned toward her slowly. You are making a mistake. You said that last night. Because it is true. Harbor Point will change this company. It will secure your future. You cannot throw that away because a few people are uncomfortable with change. Danielle opened the folder and placed the first report on his desk. These are not people who are uncomfortable. These are families whose heat was left broken while your office pushed them to leave. Grant looked at the papers without touching them. You do not understand how business works. Then explain why a shell company received emergency contractor payments and sent eviction notices to the same residents. For the first time, Grant's calm expression slipped. It was small, almost invisible, but Danielle saw it. Claire placed additional documents on the desk. Payment records. Internal emails. Complaint logs. The truth lay between them in neat stacks of paper. Grant picked up one page, then dropped it. You went through protected files. I found files that should never have been hidden, Danielle said. You were supposed to protect this company, Grant replied. I was supposed to protect people, Danielle said. I forgot that for too long. Grant moved closer, lowering his voice. Your father understood what it took to lead. He understood that difficult decisions create progress. Danielle felt the old pain of hearing her father's name used like a weapon. She had spent years trying to become the daughter everyone expected, steady and untouchable, never asking for more than she was given. But she remembered Elias in the community center, carrying Maya while rain tapped against the windows. She remembered his words. Do not confuse being alone with being the only person who cares. My father taught me to build, Danielle said. You taught me to look away. Grant's face became cold. If you take this to the board, they will remove you. They will say you failed to oversee the project. They will be right. Danielle nodded. Maybe they will. And what will your repairman think when you have nothing left? The question was meant to hurt her. Instead, It made Danielle stand straighter. "He is not mine," she said. "He is a man who deserves respect." "That is more than you have ever understood." Grant stared at her. Then he reached for the phone on his desk. "Security can escort you out." Claire stepped forward. "Before you do that, you should know the board has already received copies of these records." Grant looked at her sharply. "What did you say?" Claire's hands trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "I sent them this morning. The emergency meeting begins in 10 minutes. The room went still. Outside the windows, the city spread beneath them in pale morning light. Grant looked from Claire to Danielle, and the confidence in his face began to crack. "You think this will save you?" he asked Danielle. "I do not know if it will save me," she said. "But it might save people who have been carrying the cost of our decisions." 10 minutes later, Danielle entered the boardroom with the folder in her hands. Grant sat at the far end of the table, silent now. The directors waited beneath the cold white lights, their expressions guarded. Danielle could feel fear pressing against her ribs, but she did not run from it. She placed Maya's drawing beside the reports. The bright yellow sun looked almost out of place among the legal documents and financial charts. "Before we discuss profit," Danielle said, "we need to discuss the people whose homes were treated like obstacles." One board member leaned forward. "Ms. Whitmore, are you alleging misconduct?" Danielle looked at Grant, then at the papers in front of her. "I am admitting that I failed to ask the right questions. And I am presenting evidence that someone made sure those questions stayed unanswered." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She did not look at it. Somewhere across the city, Elias was likely working with his hands, carrying on with a day that had nothing to do with boardrooms. Danielle took a breath and began to tell the truth. For nearly 2 hours, Danielle answered questions that had been waiting years to be asked. The boardroom windows reflected a pale winter sky, and the city below looked small enough to fit inside the palm of a hand. But the people in Harbor Point did not feel small to her anymore. She could see the elderly woman wrapped in a blue blanket beside a broken radiator. She could see Maya's purple bracelet, the silver star catching light beneath a porch lamp. She could hear Elias saying that what mattered was what she did after she knew. One director asked why the internal reports had not reached the board sooner. Another asked whether Danielle had approved the early clearance schedule. She did not shift blame. "My name is on the project," she said. "I was responsible for knowing what it would do to people. I did not know because I accepted answers that were designed to keep me comfortable. That failure is mine." Grant sat at the far end of the table, his hands folded over each other. He had stopped trying to interrupt. The documents spoke more clearly than he could. Claire explained the payment trail, the hidden complaints, and the false timelines sent to residents. By the time the final report appeared on the screen, the room had become so quiet that Danielle could hear the air moving through the ceiling vents. The chair of the board removed Grant from all authority over Harbor Point pending an independent investigation. Then he turned to Danielle. "You will step away from your role as Chief Executive Officer while we review your oversight of this project." Danielle nodded. She had expected it. Still, hearing the words felt like stepping into cold water. Her title had been handed to her before she was ready for it, and she had spent years holding it so tightly that she had forgotten what it cost to carry. "I understand," she said. Grant rose from his chair. For the first time in Danielle's life, he looked smaller than the room around him. He gathered nothing from the table. He simply walked toward the door. When he reached her chair, he paused. "You will regret this," he said quietly. Danielle looked up at him. "Maybe. But I will not be ashamed of it." Grant left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click. It was not dramatic. It was only a sound. Yet Danielle felt something inside her loosen, like a knot that had been tied for too long. Outside the tower, the news moved quickly. By noon, reporters waited near the lobby doors, asking questions about Harbor Point and the company. Danielle avoided them through a side exit with Claire beside her. The cold wind cut through her coat as they crossed the parking garage. Claire held out Danielle's phone. You have missed calls from everyone. Danielle looked at the screen. Investors. Lawyers. Board members. And one message from Elias, sent an hour earlier. Heard about the meeting. Are you okay? She stared at the words until the letters blurred. No demand? No question about what she could offer. Just a simple question that no one in the boardroom had asked. Go, Claire said gently. I can handle the press statement. Danielle looked at her. Why did you help me? Claire gave a tired smile. Because I have spent too long writing pretty words around ugly decisions. Danielle nodded. Thank you. She drove south without changing out of her work clothes. The city moved past her in long gray blocks, traffic lights flashing red against wet pavement. When she reached the community center, she found Elias outside near the basketball court, replacing a loose metal cover on a heater unit. His tool bag rested beside him. Maya sat on the steps with 2 paper cups of cocoa, swinging her legs above the puddles. Elias looked up when Danielle approached. He saw the exhaustion in her face before she spoke. They removed me, she said. He wiped his hands on a cloth. For telling the truth? For failing before I told it. Elias nodded slowly. Both can be true. Danielle looked down. She had expected comfort. Instead, his honesty reached her deeper. I do not know who I am without that job, she admitted. Maya stood and walked toward her, holding out one of the cups. You are the sleepy lady, she said. Danielle laughed through the tightness in her throat. That is still true. Maya placed the cocoa in her hands. Then sit down. Danielle looked at the steps, at the thin steam rising from the cup, at Elias watching her with patient eyes. She sat beside Maya. For a while, no one spoke. The wind moved through the empty court. Somewhere inside the community center, children were practicing a song for winter break. Danielle held the warm cup between both hands. Elias finished tightening the cover, then sat on the other side of Maya. What happens now? He asked. Danielle looked toward the neighborhood beyond the court. The project is paused. The residents stay while the review happens. I want to help rebuild the plan with them, if they will let me. Elias looked at her for a long moment. That will take more than a meeting. I know. More than an apology. I know. Maya leaned against her father's arm and looked at Danielle. You can start by coming to my school play. Elias glanced at his daughter. Maya. What? She likes hot chocolate. Danielle smiled, and this time it did not feel borrowed from anyone else. I would like that, she said. Elias looked down at the small space between them on the steps. Then he moved his hand just enough for his fingers to rest beside Danielle's. He did not take her hand. He only left the choice there. Danielle looked at his hand, then placed her fingers gently against his. The contact was quiet, warm, and steady. It did not fix what had been broken. But for the first time, Danielle did not need it to. 3 weeks later, the first snow of the season dusted the sidewalks around Harbor Point, turning the old brick roofs white before noon. The demolition notices were gone from the doors. In their place, new flyers had been taped beside the mailboxes, inviting residents to a planning meeting at the community center. The headline was simple: Harbor Point Neighborhood Partnership. Danielle had read every word of the proposal before it was printed. She had helped write none of the promises until the residents had told her what they needed. Stable rent protections. Repairs before redevelopment. A community advisory board with actual voting power. Local jobs. A guarantee that no family would be asked to leave without a real place to go. The language was not polished in the way Grant would have liked. It was clear. That was the point. Danielle stood near the entrance of the community center holding a cardboard box of folding chairs. She wore jeans, boots, and a thick navy coat, her hair tucked beneath a knit cap. No assistant followed her. No driver waited outside. She had learned that arriving early did not make people trust you. It only gave you time to help set up. Elias came through the door carrying a toolbox in one hand and a bag of bagels in the other. Snowflakes clung to his shoulders. When he saw Danielle trying to unfold a chair, he stopped. "You are doing that backward," he said. Danielle looked at the chair, then at him. "I had a feeling." Elias set down the bagels and showed her how to pull the metal frame open without pinching her fingers. "There," he said. "You are learning. Slowly. That is still learning." Maya rushed in behind him wearing a bright red scarf and holding a stack of programs for her school play. "Ms. Whitmore," she said. "You came." Danielle smiled. "I said I would. You have to sit in the front row." Elias gave his daughter a look. "Maya, she does not have to." "I want to," Danielle said. Maya beamed and placed a program in her hands. The front cover showed a crooked drawing of a snowy stage and a line of stars across the top. Danielle ran her thumb over the paper, feeling something warm and unfamiliar rise in her chest. A few residents began arriving for the meeting. Mrs. Alvarez came in with her blue blanket folded over one arm, though the center was warm now. Mr. Turner from the corner grocery carried a tray of coffee. A young mother with 2 children asked where to sign in. Danielle greeted each person by name when she could. When she could not, she asked? Elias watched from the refreshment table, not with suspicion this time, but with the careful attention of someone who knew trust was built from small moments. The meeting began at 6. Danielle stood beside the large neighborhood map, but she did not take the center of the room. She handed the microphone to Mrs. Alvarez first. The older woman spoke about the winter her radiator had stopped working and how she had been afraid to complain because she thought no one would listen. Then Mr. Turner spoke about his store, his customers, and the fear of losing the block that had kept his business alive for 20 years. Danielle listened with both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. When it was her turn, she did not stand behind the podium. She stood beside the map. "I cannot undo the fear this project caused," she said. "I cannot pretend that an apology changes what people went through. But I can make sure this plan is not built without you ever again." No one applauded right away. Danielle had learned not to expect applause for doing what should have been done from the beginning. Then Mrs. Alvarez nodded once. It was small, but it mattered. After the meeting, the snow fell harder. Families left in groups, their voices carrying down the sidewalk. Inside, Elias stacked chairs while Danielle gathered the remaining papers. "You did well," he said. She looked at him. "That means more coming from you than it would from anyone else." Elias smiled. "Do not get used to it. I will try not to." Maya appeared from the hallway in her costume for the school play, wearing a silver cardboard moon around her shoulders. 5 minutes, she announced. "Front row." Danielle reached for her coat. "We should go." Elias picked up his toolbox, then paused. "Danielle?" She turned. He held out his hand, not because she needed help walking, but because he wanted her beside him. Danielle looked at his hand, then placed hers in it. Together, they stepped out into the snow. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement. For once, Danielle did not feel like she was leaving something behind. She felt like she was walking toward the life she had been too afraid to choose. The school auditorium was warm enough to fog the windows, and the smell of popcorn, wet wool, and paper snowflakes filled the air. Parents crowded the folding chairs with phones in their hands, whispering as children moved behind the curtain in costumes made from cardboard, glitter, and hope. Danielle sat in the front row between Elias and an empty seat that Maya had saved for Mrs. Alvarez. She wore a simple dark sweater, and a few snowflakes still melted in her hair from the walk-over. Elias sat beside her in his clean work jacket, his hands folded loosely in his lap. For a while, neither of them spoke. They watched the curtain sway as children hurried behind it. "You came early," Elias said. Danielle looked at the stage. "I did not want to miss anything." "You will not. Maya has been practicing the same 3 lines in our kitchen for 2 weeks. Danielle smiled. "I know. She made me promise to listen." The lights dimmed. A teacher stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone to the winter play. Then the curtain opened, revealing a painted backdrop of a snowy town beneath a paper moon. Maya walked out wearing her silver cardboard moon costume, a small star pinned near her shoulder. She looked into the audience, searching through the faces until she found Elias. Then she found Danielle. Her smile grew wider. For the next 20 minutes, the children told a simple story about a town that had forgotten how to share its light. Maya's character was the moon, and her job was to remind everyone that the sky was big enough for every star. Her voice shook on the first line, then steadied. "Light does not become smaller when you give some away," she said. "It becomes easier to see." Danielle felt her throat tighten. Elias looked at the stage without blinking. When the play ended, the room rose in applause. Maya bowed so deeply that her silver moon nearly slipped over her head. Afterward, she ran down the aisle and threw her arms around Elias. "Did I do good?" she asked. Elias lifted her off the floor. "You did better than good." Maya turned to Danielle. "Did you hear my line?" Danielle nodded. "Every word." Mrs. Alvarez joined them, smiling beneath her blue scarf. "That little moon has more sense than half the people downtown," she said. Maya grinned. Outside, the snow had slowed to a soft drift. The sidewalks shone under the streetlights, and the air smelled clean and cold. Families left the school in small groups, their voices fading into the winter night. Elias carried Maya's costume bag while she skipped ahead, following the prints she made in the fresh snow. Danielle walked beside him, close enough that their sleeves brushed. "The board approved the neighborhood partnership this afternoon," she said quietly. Elias looked at her. "They did?" "They did. The residents will have seats on the advisory board. Repairs start next week. And the demolition plan is gone." Elias stopped walking. Snow settled on his shoulders. "You did that." Danielle shook her head. "We did that. The residents did that. Claire did that. You made me see it." Elias looked down the street at Maya, who was trying to catch snowflakes on her mitten. "Seeing is only the first part," he said. Danielle nodded. "I know. I am still learning the rest." They walked on until they reached the small park across from the school. The benches were dusted white, and the bare trees held thin lines of snow on every branch. Maya ran toward a lamp post and held up her hands. "Look!" she called. "The stars are coming down." Danielle watched her for a moment, then sat on a bench. Elias sat beside her. The quiet between them was no longer fragile. It was familiar. Danielle looked at the warm windows of the school, then at the city skyline far beyond the rooftops. "That night in your car," she said, "I was afraid they would take this neighborhood. I did not even understand why it mattered so much to me." Elias turned toward her. "You remembered." "I remembered what it felt like before I became someone who only saw plans and numbers." She took a slow breath. "And I remembered that my mother used to say a home is not a building. It is the people who make you feel you can come back." Elias did not answer right away. He looked at Maya, then at Danielle. "You can come back," he said. The words were quiet, but they reached deeper than any speech in a boardroom. Danielle rested her head gently on his shoulder. This time she was awake. This time she chose it. Elias did not move away. He only leaned his head slightly toward hers as snow fell around them. Across the park, Maya laughed beneath the streetlight, her silver star catching the glow. Danielle closed her eyes for one peaceful second. She had not changed the whole world. But she had listened when it mattered. She had chosen people over fear. And beside a single father who had taught her the difference between being powerful and being human, she finally understood what her heart had been trying to say all along.